The red laser danced on Lily's white coat for a heartbeat of detail only Maya, with her dancer's eye for spacing, noticed before the chaotic noise of Fifth Avenue traffic masked the crack of a rifle. Just seconds earlier, the sidewalk outside the Royal Ballet Academy had been a mundane flurry of dismissal time. Madame Victoria stood nearby, wrapped in expensive furs, laughing charmingly with a wealthy donor while completely ignoring the children. Maya, shivering in her thin wool coat, was kneeling on the cold pavement to help 6-year-old Lily Sterling with a stubborn zipper. "Miss Maya," Lily had chirped, her breath puffing in the cold air. "My uncle promised he'd be here today." Then came the glint. The tiny red light settled on the child's chest. Maya didn't think. She didn't calculate. Instinct, honed by years of choreography, took over. She launched herself forward. "Get down!" The scream tore from her throat as she threw her body over Lily. The shot split the autumn air, a terrifying thunderclap. Maya felt the impact, instantly not a sting, but a sledgehammer blow to her shoulder that knocked the world sideways. They hit the concrete hard. Maya twisted midair, ensuring her back took the brunt of the fall, shielding Lily's head against her chest. Chaos erupted. The wealthy parents scrambled for cover, abandoning dignity. Madame Victoria shrieked, clutching her pearls, her eyes scanning for safety, not the shooter. "Stay down, baby," Maya gasped. Her vision whitened at the edges. The pain was hot and wet, spreading down her arm, reawakening the ghost of the injury that had ended her career 2 years ago. But she didn't let go. Lily was sobbing against her cheap coat, but she was whole. She was safe. Tires screeched. Doors slammed. A wall of security men swarmed the scene. Through the haze of pain, a man sprinted toward them, looking like a storm in a ruined suit. Arthur Sterling dropped to his knees in the dirt, his face pale with a terror only a parent could know. "Lily," he roared. "She's okay," Maya whispered, the words tasting of copper. She tried to shift, but her body refused. Arthur looked down. He saw his niece unharmed, peering out from beneath the woman bleeding on the sidewalk. He looked at Maya, really looked at her, and saw the fierce protection in her fading eyes. She wasn't the invisible teacher anymore. She was the only one who hadn't run away. As the ambulance sirens wail, Arthur grips his head of security's arm, his voice lethal. "She saved my life. You make sure she survives, or heads will roll." Maya woke not to the sterile smell of a city hospital, but to the scent of cedarwood and fresh lilies, lying in a bed with sheets softer than anything she had ever owned. For a moment, she panicked, disoriented by the silence. There were no sirens, no shouting neighbors, just the rhythmic hum of a machine monitoring her pulse. She tried to sit up, but a sharp tug in her shoulder stopped her. A nurse in a crisp uniform appeared instantly, reaching out to check the 4-line. Maya flinched at the touch, a reflex born from years of navigating a world that rarely offered her gentleness without a price. "Easy, Ms. Jenkins," the nurse said, though her eyes held more professional detachment than warmth. "You're at the Sterling estate." Mr. Sterling insisted on the best private care. Maya looked around. This wasn't a room. It was a palace. High ceilings, velvet drapes, and bulletproof glass overlooking a manicured winter garden. It was beautiful, and it terrified her. She was a woman who counted pennies for the subway. She didn't belong in a room that cost more than her life savings. The door opened, and Arthur Sterling entered. He looked different without the panic of the shooting, imposing, wearing a casual sweater that probably cost a fortune. "You're awake," he said, his voice deep and guarded. "The doctors say the bullet passed through. You were lucky." "I need to go home," Maya said, her voice raspy. "My landlord, if I miss a shift." "Your rent is paid for the next year," Arthur interrupted, pulling a chair closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "And you can't go home. The police found footprints on the roof where the shooter was. He saw your face, Maya. You're a witness. Until we find him, you stay here." "I didn't ask for this," Maya countered, pushing back against the pillows. She felt small here, dark skin against white silk, a stark contrast that the house staff seemed to notice too. A maid entered with a tea tray, her gaze lingering on Maya with a mixture of curiosity and subtle disdain, the look people gave when the help sat at the master's table. Maya recognized it instantly. It was the same look Madame Victoria gave her every day. "I know you didn't," Arthur said, noticing her discomfort but misinterpreting the cause. He placed a manila envelope on the bedside table. "But this isn't just about the shooting." He slid a photo out. It showed Maya walking to the subway weeks ago. Then another of her buying coffee. They were watching Lily. And because you were always with her, they were watching you too. Maya stared at the photos, a cold chill settling in her stomach deeper than the bullet wound. She hadn't just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had been a target of observation long before she became a target of violence. She tried to stand, to flee this suffocating luxury, but the room spun. Her knees buckled. Arthur was there in a second, catching her by her good arm, steadying her without crossing the line into intimacy. "Please," he said, the command in his voice softening into a plea. "You are the only one who acted. Everyone else ran. Let me repay that debt. Let me keep you safe." Maya looked at the high fences outside. She realizes she isn't just a guest. She's a piece on a chessboard she doesn't understand yet. "I'll stay," she whispers, "until Lily is safe." 3 days later, the oppressive silence of the estate was broken not by guns, but by Maya's quiet voice interrupting a high-level security meeting in the library. She stood in the doorway, her arms still in a sling, watching Arthur and Tony argue over a sprawling map of the city. The room smelled of old paper, expensive scotch, and frustration. They were looking for a sophisticated threat, a tactical genius, but they were missing the obvious. "It wasn't a tactical breach," Maya said, stepping into the room. "It was a performance." Arthur looked up, surprised to see her out of bed. "Maya, you should be resting." "I've spent my life looking at stages, Mr. Sterling," she said, walking to the table and pointing at the blueprint of the academy with her good hand. "Studio C. The afternoon sun hits the east mirror exactly at 4 p.m. It turns the window into a fishbowl for anyone watching from the park, but the glare blinds everyone inside. If I were setting a stage for a tragedy, that's exactly where I'd place my actors." Tony frowned, rechecking his angles, but Arthur went still. He looked at the map, then at Maya. The realization hit him hard. His highly paid ex-military team had looked for sniper nests. The dancer had looked for lighting and sightlines. "You see things we don't," Arthur murmured, a new respect replacing the pity in his eyes. Before he could say more, the heavy oak doors opened. The butler announced Madame Victoria. The academy owner swept in, carrying a bouquet of white roses that looked too perfect to be real. She rushed to Arthur with theatrical concern, then turned her gaze to Maya. The warmth in her eyes instantly cooled, replaced by a sugary, condescending smile. "Oh, you poor thing," Victoria cooed, patting Maya's uninjured shoulder a little too firmly. "I was so worried. But look at you, resting in luxury. It's quite a step up from that little apartment in Harlem, isn't it?" "I'm recovering, madam," Maya said stiffly. Victoria leaned in, her voice dropping so only Maya could hear, masked by the rustle of her coat. "Don't get too comfortable, dear. People like Mr. Sterling might feel grateful for a moment, but they don't keep help like you around for dinner. Once the police are done, you'll be back where you belong. If you still have a job, that is." The words were a velvet-wrapped blade. Maya felt the sting, familiar and sharp. It was the same tone Victoria had used 2 years ago when she offered Maya a job as a charity case. Maya watched the older woman turn back to Arthur, her mask of benevolence slipping back into place as she chatted about school schedules. As Victoria's car finally drove away down the long gravel driveway, the library felt colder. Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. "She's annoying, but she cares about the school." "Does she?" Maya turned to him, her eyes dark and alert. "She asked about the press coverage. She asked when Lily would return to class so the other parents would calm down. But Arthur, she didn't ask about Lily's nightmares. Not once." The blue light of the computer screen was the only thing illuminating the library at 2 a.m., casting long, ghostly shadows over Maya's face as she stared at a spreadsheet that shouldn't exist. She sat alone in the nerve center of Arthur's estate, the silence broken only by the relentless drumming of rain against the bulletproof glass. Her hand moved unconsciously to her left shoulder, rubbing the thick scar tissue through her shirt. It wasn't aching from the cold tonight, It was throbbing with a phantom pain, triggered by the date glowing on the monitor. November 12th, 2 years ago. You shouldn't be seeing that, Tony said, stepping out of the shadows. He looked tired, holding a fresh pot of coffee. The boss didn't want you to know until we were sure. Sure of what? Maya's voice was barely a whisper, but it held a tremor of terrified realization. That the payment from Victoria's private account was made 2 days before my accident? That the shell company she paid belongs to the brother of the man who ran me down. Arthur entered the room then. He didn't look like a billionaire tycoon. He looked like a man ready to burn the world down. He walked straight to the desk and placed a dossier on top of Maya's findings. Tony found the driver, Arthur said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He confessed an hour ago. It wasn't an accident, Maya. It was a job. The air left the room. Maya stared at the papers, the pieces of her broken life finally rearranging themselves into a horrifying picture. 2 years ago, she was a rising star. Then a car came out of nowhere. Her leg was crushed, her shoulder shattered. 3 days later, Madame Victoria had appeared at her bedside like a savior, offering a job when no one else would look at a broken dancer. She didn't hire me for my talent, Maya said, the realization tasting like ash in her mouth. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were tears of rage, not sorrow. She broke me first. She needed someone desperate. She needed a black woman with a ruined career who would be so grateful for a paycheck that she'd never ask questions. She thought I'd be invisible. She thought I'd just be furniture. Arthur's hand clenched around his whiskey glass until it shattered. Amber liquid and shards of crystal rained onto the expensive rug, but he didn't flinch. She groomed you to be the perfect blind spot, he growled. She sold my daughter's safety to my enemies, and she used you to ensure no one would notice the pattern. She treated you like a disposable tool. He walked around the desk, ignoring the mess, and stopped in front of Maya. He didn't touch her. He knew better than to treat her like a victim right now. Instead, he offered her the only thing that mattered: agency. We have enough to bury her, Arthur said. The FBI is ready to move. You can stay here, safe and hidden, while I handle it. Or... Maya looked down at her hands that had shielded a child, hands that had worked for pennies while Victoria grew rich on betrayal. She slowly stood up. Her silhouette against the window was no longer that of a broken teacher. It was a statue of vengeance. Get the car, Arthur, she said, her voice steel. I'm done hiding. The heavy oak doors of the Royal Ballet Academy swung open with a groan, cutting through the silence of the deserted building. Inside the opulent office, Madame Victoria jumped, a stack of shredded paper slipping from her manicured hands. She was frantic, working by the light of a single desk lamp, trying to erase the paper trail of a lifetime of greed. When she looked up and saw them, for a split second, fear flashed across her face, but she smoothed it away instantly, replacing it with the same arrogant mask she had worn for decades. This is private property, Victoria snapped, though her voice wavered slightly as she saw Arthur Sterling stepping out of the shadows. Then she looked at Maya, and her lip curled. And you brought the help. How quaint. Maya stepped into the pool of yellow light. She didn't limp. She didn't look down. She walked straight to the desk and slammed the dossier Arthur had given her onto the mahogany surface. We know about the payments, Victoria. We know about the Antonov family. And we know about the driver you hired 2 years ago. Victoria stared at the file, then let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look ashamed. She just looked at Maya with pure, unadulterated disgust. You think you're so clever, don't you? I gave you a life when you were nothing. You were a cripple from Harlem with no future. I gave you a job, a salary, a purpose. You should be on your knees thanking me, not judging me. You didn't give me a life, Maya said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with the force of her anger. You stole one. You broke my body so you could buy my silence. You thought a black woman with a disability would be so desperate for crumbs that she wouldn't notice you were selling the whole bakery to criminals. And I was right. Victoria hissed, abandoning all pretense of elegance. Her face twisted, revealing the ugly racism she had hidden under polite smiles. You were invisible. You were the perfect screen. Who suspects the charity case? Who looks at the poor, limping teacher when there are wealthy children to exploit? You were a tool, Maya. Nothing more. Maya leaned across the desk, invading the space of the woman who had haunted her nightmares. I am not a tool. I am the woman who saved the child you sold. I am the shield you didn't account for. And now, Maya straightened up, towering over the sitting woman. I am the one taking you down. Victoria scoffed, reaching for the gold-plated phone on her desk. Please. I know every judge in this city. I know the mayor. One call, and you'll be back on the street before morning. Your connections are gone. Arthur spoke for the first time. His voice was low, final, like a gavel striking wood. The mayor has seen the files. So has the district attorney. Outside, the night was suddenly bathed in flashing red and blue lights. The wail of sirens cut through the air, surrounding the building. Victoria froze, the phone slipping from her fingers and clattering onto the desk. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking old and small. The FBI is downstairs, Arthur said, opening the door. It's over, Victoria. Two agents entered, their faces grim. As they pulled Victoria from her chair and placed handcuffs on her wrists, she didn't look like a queen anymore. She looked like exactly what she was, a petty criminal who had underestimated the wrong woman. Maya watched them lead her away, feeling a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lift from her chest. She turned to the window, watching the police car drive away. Arthur moved to stand beside her, offering his hand not to steady her, but to hold it. Let's go home, he said softly. The rich aroma of roasted turkey and spiced cranberry sauce filled the hallway, finally replacing the lingering memory of antiseptic and fear that had haunted the estate for weeks. It was Thanksgiving Day, late November, and the golden autumn light streamed fearlessly through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the drawing room. 3 weeks ago, these windows had been terrifying vulnerabilities. Today, they were just frames for a beautiful day. In the center of the room, Lily twirled in her new dress, laughing as she perfected a pirouette. She wasn't dancing in a basement or behind drawn curtains anymore. She was dancing in the light. Maya stood by the fireplace, watching her. The sling was gone, replaced by a simple, elegant silk blouse that Arthur had left for her that morning. She wasn't just a guest anymore. The papers on Arthur's desk signed her on as the director of the newly established New Hope Arts Center, the institution that had replaced Victoria's corrupt academy. It was a place where talent, not bank accounts, defined a student's worth. She looks happy, Arthur said, coming up beside her. He held 2 glasses of apple cider, his usual stern expression softened into something unrecognizable peace. I haven't seen her dance like that since before her parents died. She feels safe, Maya said, taking the glass. That's all a child needs to bloom. And you? Arthur turned to her, his dark eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her breath hitch. Do you feel safe? Maya looked out at the garden, then back at the man who had stood by her when the world collapsed. I feel seen, she admitted softly. For 2 years, I was a ghost. Victoria made me believe I was broken, that I should be grateful for the scraps she threw me. You made me realize the only thing broken was her system. Arthur reached out, his fingers brushing hers. It was a tentative gesture, respectful but undeniably intimate. You saved my family, Maya. But I think, in a way, you saved me too. This house was a fortress before you came. Now, it feels like a home. Dinner is served, Lily announced, running over and grabbing both of their hands, pulling them toward the dining room. They sat around the long table of billionaire tycoon, a little girl, and a teacher from Harlem, a patchwork family forged in fire. There were no other guests, no pretenses, just them. Arthur raised his glass for a toast. He didn't speak of business or revenge. He looked straight at Maya. To the shield that protected us, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And to the light that guided us out of the dark. Maya smiled, tears pricking her eyes, happy tears this time. She caught her reflection in the glass of the patio doors. She didn't see a victim. She didn't see a charity case, or a tool to be used. She saw Maya Jenkins strong, loved, and exactly where she was meant to be. Happy Thanksgiving, she whispered to the room, and for the first time in her life, she knew she was finally home. Maya found her true home not in a mansion, but in the acceptance of a family she risked everything to save. Her journey reminds us that true strength often hides behind quiet scars, and that an act of unconditional kindness is the only force powerful enough to break the chains of prejudice. As you go about your day, perhaps look a little closer at the quiet heroes in your own life. You never know whose heart is waiting to be seen.